Take a look at this. This player just got hit by a magic spell and took massive damage, despite the fact that he clearly had the Protect from Magic prayer activated. So what exactly did he do wrong in this situation? Well, Old School Runescape is a bit of a janky game, and that leads to some unintuitive interactions. It's time for us to learn together how prayers work in Old School Runescape. Using the right protection prayer at the right time is a core mechanic to a lot of boss fights in Old School Runescape. As is using the right protection in the bedroom, so this video is... okay, I'm kidding, this video is not sponsored. But you should use protection in the bedroom though. Before understanding how prayers work, you have to understand how game ticks work. To be brief, a game tick is a cycle that occurs every 0.6 seconds where your computer and the game server exchange information on everything that's happened since the last tick occurred, and update the current state of the game. This is fundamental to understand before you can understand how prayer mechanics work, so if you need a slightly more elaborate explanation than what I just gave there, click on the card in the corner to watch a short explainer on game ticks and then come back to this video. So, how exactly do prayers work? When you click on a prayer in your prayer book, it will become active on the next game tick. Any effects that prayer gives will become active starting on this game tick and will remain active for as long as you have the prayer enabled. When you have a prayer active, an invisible counter, which I'll call the prayer bucket, will start to fill up every game tick with what I'll call prayer droplets. Higher level prayers tend to contribute more droplets to the bucket than lower level prayers, and having multiple prayers active will contribute the sum of their droplets. When the number of droplets in your bucket exceeds your invisible prayer drain resistance value, you will lose 1 prayer point, and your prayer drain resistance value will be subtracted from the bucket. Your prayer drain resistance value is 60 by default, but you can increase it by equipping items that give prayer bonus. For every point of prayer bonus, your prayer drain resistance is increased by 2. So here's the fun part. The game only calculates how many droplets to add to your prayer bucket on the tick after your prayers are active. But if you deactivate your prayers, no droplets will be added to the bucket on that game tick. And herein lies an exploit/bug turned game mechanic. If you deactivate your prayers and then immediately reactivate them before the next game tick occurs, the game will not add any droplets to your bucket, but will then once again reactivate your prayers on that same game tick. If you repeatedly deactivate and reactivate your prayers between every game tick, you will constantly have their benefits without ever incurring any prayer drain. This is called prayer flicking, and it can entirely eliminate the need to use prayer potions to keep your prayers up. Now, if you think that having to double click your prayers every 0.6 seconds sounds tedious, well, you're definitely not alone. I agree with you there, and I personally hate prayer flicking. Fortunately though, there is a simpler version of prayer flicking called lazy flicking, which I will go over in a minute. But before talking about that, let's talk about how damage is calculated. Or rather, when it is calculated. For all attacks made by you and other players, and most attacks made by NPCs, damage is calculated the moment that the attack animation starts. For melee attacks, this feels intuitive, since you will see the damage register immediately anyways. But for ranged and magic attacks, this feels unintuitive, because you don't actually see the damage hit splat appear until the projectile reaches its target. But despite what it may look like, the damage is actually already calculated as soon as the firing or spellcasting animation starts. With this knowledge, I think you can start to piece together what happened in that first clip that I showed you. But first, how can we make use of this knowledge to make prayer flicking less annoying? Well, let's say you want to use an offensive prayer to boost your damage or accuracy. All you need to do is make sure that it is active on the tick that your character starts their attack. For example, a dragon scimitar attacks every 4 ticks or 2.4 seconds. That means that you can activate your offensive prayers, like Piety, just before the tick your character will attack, and then immediately deactivate it afterwards. If you repeat this at 4 tick intervals, you will never drain any prayer points for doing so, since you only have your prayer active for 1 tick at a time. This is called lazy flicking, and in learning this, you'll quickly learn why people call Old School Runescape a rhythm game. We can apply the same to using protection prayers, but it's a little bit more complicated. As a short aside, you should know that in most cases, using the correct protection prayer against an attack will reduce damage by 100% against NPCs and by 40% against other players. However, some NPCs have special mechanics that allow them to hit some or all of their damage through protection prayers. You can check the OSRS wiki page for typeless damage to see a full list of these attacks. Most attacks from NPCs work the same way as attacks from players. They are calculated the moment that the attack animation begins, and therefore your protection prayer only needs to be active on that tick that the attack animation starts. This tends to look a little silly since you can disable your protection prayer as you can visibly see a projectile hitting you, but it won't damage you since the game has already calculated that you correctly prayed against it and therefore that attack is doing 0 damage. However, not all attacks work like this. As a rule of thumb, most of the older NPCs in the game, from Aram to Zulrah, use the on-animation damage calculations I just described. Although a notable exception amongst older NPCs is Jad in the Zar fight caves, who telegraphs his ranged and magic attacks, so you have time to react to them and activate the correct protection prayer. The damage from these attacks is only calculated once Jad's projectile is spawned. Some of the newer NPCs in the game instead calculate damage on the tick that it impacts the player. In these instances, you need to have the correct prayer enabled on the tick that the projectile connects with your character, rather than the one where the attack animation started, in order to nullify its damage. You will likely find these attacks more intuitive to deal with. They are typically well telegraphed so that you have time to react appropriately. Some examples of attacks that deal damage on impact are Scurius's magic and ranged attacks, and the Leviathan's orb attacks. I will avoid making a comprehensive list of these attacks here since it is likely that it'll become out of date quite quickly, so you will either have to check the wiki to see if an NPC uses this mechanic, or just learn as you go while fighting them. Although the latter is not recommended if you're playing on a hardcore account. And that's Old School Runescape's Prayer Mechanics Explained. Prayer usage plays a key role in many boss fights in Old School RuneScape, so if you want to get into PvM, it is important to get comfortable with how prayer works. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I hope you found this explanation intuitive and that it helped you better understand one of Old School RuneScape's unique game mechanics. All the best and take care.